Iran's parliamentary speaker, Director Brennan, said that there have been no negotiations between the two countries. I am confused how the President of the United States can credibly stand up there before the cameras under the wing of Air Force One and claim the conversations have been had that apparently haven't been had. And I'm also wary of taking the word of Iran. Like, they are an authoritarian regime who's known to lie. But, like, I'm confused. What is going on? Help me. Calm me down.
Well, I tend to believe Iran more than I do Donald Trump, because he could not acknowledge the truth even when it is, he's slapped in the face with it repeatedly. And it's clear that, he is flailing right now. He's trying to figure out how he's going to get out of this debacle that he has created. And so he's going to make these claims about negotiations, that the Iranians now are sending signals that they really want to make a deal, and indicates that they're going to make a deal on our terms. I don't think anything close to the truth in that statement. They may be talking to people indirectly, and we know that the Turks and the Egyptians are trying to find some way to mediate this problem. So there could be some members, distant members of parliament that are out there that are speaking individually. But I don't believe there's anybody speaking authoritatively right now on behalf of the Iranian government with the Trump administration.
The discussions took place yesterday. They went into yesterday evening. That's what the president said, Michael Steele. The president is claiming there are negotiations going down.
I think the president's lying, but, that's just me. I may be the only one journalist that would say that out loud in public, because the president offers us no proof that he's having these conversations. I mean, I'm thinking that if I started a war and I've done all this bombing and all this killing and maiming and blowing up buildings, that not only would I be in a position to demand and get a response, but those folks I could show. This is who I'm talking to. They've bent the knee and they're ready now to make a deal. So I think Donald Trump is doing what Donald Trump always does, and that is talking out of his behind. So the Bulwark's Bill Kristol made it also very clear for me in this wonderful piece from the Bulwark, better to taco than not to taco. Trump's central war aim is now just to fix the situation that his excursion, and okay, look it up, Donald Trump, the difference between incursion and excursion, caused. Presumably the end point of the negotiations between the Trump administration and the Iranian regime will look something like this: a stop to the attacks on Iran in exchange for a return to the status quo antebellum. In other words, how things were before Trump launched this war in the face of no imminent threat and with no authorization from Congress. Because that's ultimately what you're looking at here. How do you see the president? Director Brennan, I think, put on the table aptly, hey, the Egyptians and the Turks, they're all trying to get this thing to a space, but you're dealing with an asymmetrical president who doesn't really do anything except for by feeling.
Well, he's between a rock and a hard place right now, Michael, and he's got to do something. He cannot allow the Strait of Hormuz to be shut down like it is right now. He cannot allow Iran to continue to call the shots. I mean, I think back to there was a telling incident back in February in which Donald Trump had Zelensky in his office. Remember that? Mm-hmm. And he said, "You don't hold the cards. You don't hold the cards." Well, Zelensky had the cards. Mm-hmm. Trump just couldn't see them. Guess what? The same exact thing is happening here. The Iranians have the cards. They have the will to fight, card number one. Card number two, they have the Strait of Hormuz. And card number three, they got nuclear, highly enriched nuclear uranium, 60%, in a whole bunch of centrifuges somewhere in the in their country that we haven't found. They hold at least three cards that the Trump administration seems unable to see or to do anything about.
Put another way, the enemy always gets a vote. So in light of the cards that Iran is holding, if you are the Turks, if you are the Egyptians, and you are in fact doing some high-level negotiating on the part of the United States or as a proxy because you want to see this come to a peaceful resolution or a conclusion, which of those three cards are you contending with? Because Donald Trump is going to need to say that he accomplished something, theoretically, in order to exit here.
Well, what he's accomplished is decimating the Iranian military. I think, the ballistic missile inventory has been degraded. A lot of their capabilities have been degraded. But they still, as Steve pointed out, have the will to fight. They're defiant. They're not going to give up. And they still have that highly enriched uranium hidden somewhere, which is really quite of a concern. And then also, the regime is still in power. despite what Israel and the United States has tried to do. So I think what the Turks and the Egyptians were probably trying to do is to get some type of cessation of hostilities on both sides, trying to find a way to be able to stop having the bombs dropping and the missiles flying, and then to engage in negotiations about how we go forward on that. What can be done in order to allow the traffic going through the Hormuz to go through safely and peacefully. But I think the first thing to do is to try to get a stop to this violence and the hostilities that are taking place.
Well, I think it's quite important that the violence pauses, the hostilities pause, the temperature is brought down. One, because our American servicemen and women are being put in harm's way. But two, according to the New York Times, gas prices have jumped 30% in some states in 2 weeks. This is what the Times writes. This was yesterday. With price hikes casting a long shadow over the upcoming midterm elections, the Trump administration has taken some early steps to blunt them, including easing sanctions on Russian oil exports, as well as some on Iranian oil already at sea, a move that may bolster Iran's ailing economy and which signals a stark reversal on U.S. policy. I'm trying to understand, Alicia, what this has to do with the American economy and the American people at the pump. I don't think we use Russian oil. I don't think we use Iranian oil. I don't understand how this fixes the issue that we are seeing. And you put on top of that, Iran, I think, is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think they are now engaging on the social media battlefield in a way where it is appealing to regular Americans. I've seen a lot of people sharing these memes and these Lego videos that the Iranian government seems to have put out today, making fun of the president, making fun of what's happening. I just think this is all adding to the pressure keg, the powder keg, for lack of a better term, that is currently on the table. Especially when you have the Israelis saying they're only midway through this fight.
I hope you filled up your car over the weekend, Alicia.
Oh, goodness.
Because it's going to get worse. If you look at what's going on right now in the Persian Gulf, you got 1,500 ships that are waiting to get through. 1,500. It's going to take at least a month for this convoy escort mission to get started, at least a month. And it'll take 2 months to work off the backlog. You're looking at 3 months until we get anywhere close to semblance of order.
That's if the strait is open.
That's if the strait is open. Now, if they have used one of those asymmetric threats that you just talked about a while ago, missiles, drones, speedboats, homemade cruise missiles. Remember the battleship Moskva that got sank back in by the Ukrainians 4 years ago? That was essentially a surfboard on steroids. Okay, they have a lot of things they can apply to this fight. It only takes 1 or 2 of those a week, and they're going to shut down the strait for months on end. So, I mean, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Fill up your cars now, folks, because we're in for a long fight.
That's
don't go anywhere. So just go a mile at a time.
Basically, drive slow and turn that air off.
I may not be there this weekend, Grandma. So Director Brennan, I want to go back to the General's card analogy because I like it. I think the idea when you look at the 3 players here, the Iranian government, the regime, Donald Trump, and Zelensky, and the cards that they presumably hold. I take note of the fact that Zelensky talking about what the Russians are doing. Now, remember, Donald Trump has made this easy for the Russians. I mean, where we are in oil prices right now, they're like loving it. They're paying for all of this now. They got the cash coming in to do it. He notes Russia is using its own signals intelligence and electronic intelligence capabilities, as well as part of the data obtained through cooperation with partners in the Middle East, Zelensky said, citing a report the Ukraine's chief of defense intelligence. He called that the evidence from Ukraine's military intelligence irrefutable. That's a card that the Iranians have also, Russia. They have a Russia card that they can play and that they are playing because Russia is giving them intelligence. Russia is helping them, to your point, General, stay in the game, essentially. How do you see it?
Then why did we lift the sanctions on the oil?
Because what?
Why did we lift the sanctions on the Russian oil? You're making a very compelling argument.
Because y'all have to follow the money and who in Donald Trump's orbit is getting paid right now.
Director Brennan.
I mean, don't look for logic in all of this and consistency across the board because, quite frankly, there's not any from my perspective. Again, it's very clear that the Iranians do hold more cards right now than the Trump administration ever thought they had. between continued defiance, continued ability to shoot missiles against the Gulf states, against Israel, be able to interdict shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. These are big cards. And again, I think Donald Trump now, in private, realizes this is a mess. And that's why when he laid down this ultimatum of 5 days, give
me 5 days to get out of this mess.
Well, rather than commit war crimes, which is going after civilian electric grids and whatever, he doesn't know what he wants to do. But his traditional way of dealing with things is to threaten, intimidate, and believing that people are going to then fold. They're not going to fold. The Iranians not going to fold. As you point out, the Iranians, between signals intelligence and satellite imagery and other types of things, as well as enhancing their capabilities on drones, because there are components now that the Russians have been able to develop that they have used in Ukraine that they are now sharing with the Iranians. So I think the Iranians, yes, they know they've taken on the chin. They don't have to win all these battles. Right. They just have to survive.
That's it.
And they're enduring. And even the Iranian diaspora, including here in the United States, is recognizing now how much devastation and destruction is taking place inside of Iran, their families. And these are the people who are hurting. It's the Iranian people. Look what has happened to the infrastructure of Iran. And the basis for the protests and demonstrations that led to the death of maybe tens of thousands of individuals was economically based.
Yeah.
And so how is this war going to help alleviate the suffering of the Iranian people? If anything, it's just going to make it worse.
Why send 2,200 Marines from Japan? Why send 2,200 Marines from California?
That's a very good question. I think that they're probably talking about a ground operation at Karg Island. There might also be a ground operation at one of the islands in the Strait of Hormuz. The problem with Karg Island is a long ways away from the strait. It's not really
the director is over here shaking his head just now.
I mean, no, I totally agree. It'd be absolutely ludicrous to do this. That's what
American life.
You putting boots on the ground. Yeah, sure, they're going to be able to take Karg Island, let's say, fairly easily, probably in about a week or so, something like that. And they have 2,200 with an aviation component, so they can probably control that ground and seize that terrain pretty easily. But now they're going to be sitting 20 miles off the coast of Iran, and they're just a big target. Think about all the missiles that are going to be fired, all the drones that are going to come over. Think about the political implications of having American soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines killed on Iranian sovereign territory. Think about what that kind of message would send to the entire world and to the Iranian people. These are tough, resilient people. They are not going to take this very, very lightly.
Just real quick, tell me about the deep breaths you're taking right now.
Again, thinking about committing U.S. troops, whether it be to Karg Island or whether it be along the strait. Iran has about 1,000 miles of coastline in the Gulf. To put our soldiers there, they'll be sitting ducks. They'll be sitting ducks. The Iranians will throw things at them. You're going to have a lot more deaths. So, I'm just hoping this thing is going to de-escalate quickly. But committing I think, again, he's sending the Marines there as a way to threaten and then try to intimidate. But the Iranians, I don't think they're going to be intimidated.
And by the way, they know we're coming, okay? Think of the booby traps.
They see the news.
They're watching this. Think of the booby traps. Think of all the things that they're doing right now, all the mines that are going to be set outside of Karg Island. Think about how difficult it is to actually conduct this mission, and it's going to be an absolute disaster if they do this. And God help us if we ever start thinking about conducting military operations to seize the uranium in Isfahan. That's the other thing that they've been talking about. Of course, that wouldn't be a Marine move when probably talking about thousands of soldiers, maybe the 160th SOAR, Special Operations Aviation Regiment, something like that, maybe Delta Force or whatnot. That would be the most risky military operations, special operations military operations that this nation has ever conducted.